Hello again. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our third plenary session at the 2022 AAAS annual meeting. I'm Susan Amara, the president of AAAS. I'm particularly excited to hear today from Deepak Divan, and you'll be learning more about him in just a minute from Sally Morton. Today's session is brought to you by the generous support of Arizona State University. We were delighted to have ASU as the host university of the 2021 annual meeting, and it has been a pleasure to continue that partnership with them this year. It's my pleasure to turn the virtual stage over to Sally Morton of ASU, who will introduce tonight's exciting session.
Hello, and welcome to this evening's plenary session of the 2022 AAAS annual meeting. My name is Sally Morton, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Knowledge Enterprise at Arizona State University. Arizona State University was thrilled to be the host institution for last year's AAAS annual meeting, and we are delighted to sponsor this plenary session featuring Dr. Deepak Divan. Dr. Divan is Professor, John E. Pippin Chair, GRA Eminent Scholar, and Director of the Center for Distributed Energy at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Dr. Divan's work asks important questions and proposes practical solutions to the challenges facing our transition to new forms of energy and new ways to distribute it. And importantly, he and his team are working to accelerate the best ideas into practical use quickly as new innovations arise. Here at Arizona State University, our university charter directs our focus and commitment to three important priorities: creating access to higher education, taking fundamental responsibility for the communities we serve, and conducting research of public value. Our first of its kind Global Futures Laboratory is modeled on U.S. national laboratories. The Global Futures Laboratory is a platform to address the complex social, economic, and scientific challenges created by the current and future effects of climate change. Around Arizona State University, researchers are tackling challenges in a way that complements Dr. Divan's work. From cutting-edge research in solar power to algae that can act as a biofuel, from high-capacity energy storage to modernization of the electrical grid, Arizona State University is taking a leading role in the shift to new forms of energy. As they begin to come online, access to these new technologies must be distributed equitably and not just reserved for the wealthiest nations or the wealthiest people. Arizona State University is thinking deeply about those societal and cultural issues to ensure everyone will have safe, secure, and resilient access to energy. One example of this kind of social embeddedness is our work with the Navajo Nation as they transition away from coal power. When the Navajo Generating Station, the largest coal power plant in the western United States, closed, Arizona State University had already been working for years with the Navajo Nation on both the transition to renewable energy and microgrids and on the potential for economic and social disruption when hundreds of jobs disappeared. It's these kinds of complicated problems that motivate Arizona State University's transdisciplinary approach. We work to not only solve society's grand challenges, but to change the very nature of problem solving itself. And our portfolio is comprehensive, from healthcare to microtechnology, from national security to decarbonization, from justice and equality to humanity's interplanetary future. At Arizona State University, we have an innovative mindset about problem solving and discovery that extends far beyond our campus and out into the world. Our door is open. We hope you'll join us on this important mission. We are pleased to sponsor this plenary lecture and look forward to hearing Dr. Divan's talk titled Addressing Energy Access, Equity, and Resilience in the 21st Century. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to welcome you to this session on energy access, equity, and resilience in the 21st century. And now let me turn it over to Professor Deepak Divan, Director of the Center for Distributed Energy at Georgia Tech.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you, Susan, for giving me this opportunity to share my perspectives, with the AAAS audience. And some of the work that we've done in the areas of energy access, equity and resiliency. I'm honored to share the stage also with Kathleen Carrico, who I listened to yesterday, and very impressed with some of the work that's been done in terms of use of mRNA for therapy. Wow, that's really great company to be in. I'm going to talk about energy access really, and as we look forward to linking the topics of energy equity and in particular climate change and just one second, please. Climate change and carbon, and kind of wonder why this is all so hard. So, let me get going without, much ado out here. So, as I mentioned, I'm with the Center for Distributed Energy. I'm a professor at Georgia Tech, and I've spent a lot of my career working in the area of, energy, the grid, power electronics, energy access, and kind of going back and forth between academia and startups, trying to figure out how to take the science that we've been working on and turn that into impact. The thought process out here has been that how do you kind of take the new technologies that are coming up in terms of digitalization, decentralization, decarbonization, and how do you turn that into things that we can actually apply? Let's start at the top with energy and climate. This is a topic everybody's familiar with. We've been kind of living in a fossil fuel world, and we kind of look at the energy that is consumed. We have tremendous infrastructure that has actually been put down. Trillions of dollars have been, put into it. And we have, over the last 20, 25 years, kind of become aware that there's a problem here. Anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions, are possibly linked to climate change. In principle, we would like to solve it, but there's tremendous negative impact. And a lot of the carbon emission issues kind of considered aspirational at this point in time. One of the things, I want to kind of draw emphasis on is the fact that fossil fuel typically works with Carnot cycle efficiencies that are not very good. If you now look at the 100 quads of energy that are being put out at this point in time, are consumed in the US, we see that only about 32% of that is effectively used and 67% is wasted. There's a lot of arguments you hear about the fact that renewable energy really cannot replace the fossil infrastructure. But if you look at it, we already have 15 quads coming from non-fossil. And only 18 more are needed. So it's not a huge step, but if you kind of boil it down, we see that, the transformation to a low carbon economy is really not possible with 20th century technologies, and something else is really needed. At the heart of it, we don't really want to emit carbon dioxide, but we can't live without energy. It links to almost everything that we need to do in terms of sustainable development goals that the UN has put out, whether it's food, whether it's gender, waters, sanitation, oceans, everything needs, energy. If we look at another chart, which is on the right, which is really something that links what's being called the Human Development Index to energy use, we see a very interesting trend out here. We see that, as you go up in Human Development Index, the amount of energy you consume, goes up, dramatically. And so you kind of look at that and say, how are we going to get everybody to the same level of human development? It seems almost impossible because the amount of energy that you have to use, is too much. And we'll see what the impact of that really looks like. So, what do we really want? At the end of the day, I don't want to emit CO2 when I am going about doing the things that I want to do. The last thing I want to do is emit CO2. Okay, I would just want a source of abundant, reliable, low-cost energy, which is available whenever and wherever I want it, and I want it to drive economic growth and human development. So the way I think about it is carbon dioxide emissions are not a humanly relatable goal. Okay, and we need to translate this down to something that we can kind of live with. So the question is, are we now living with 21st century technologies that can allow us to have our cake and eat it too? And if we could, then that kind of begins to paint a completely, different picture. So, what are we living with today? The grid is what connects everything. It's been called the largest machine made by man. It has got tens of thousands of generators, all working and rotating together, delivering power across distances. And we don't think too much about it, but these generators are rotating with millisecond precision, across the continent. And these were all designed and built and operating for 100 years before microprocessors ever came into the scene. So very well engineered in terms of how you could get exploit the intrinsic properties of these, large generators using things like passive droop control and just local information for protection and standardization to be able to make this whole system work properly. It's evolved into a very complex system where you have all the hard assets that you're talking about, which work with millisecond precision, the fast physics. Everything has to be really synchronized properly to work, But then you have all these processes that allow the complexity to serve the millions of customers that we have. And this is everything from human processes, some control processes on top of that. It includes things like market functions on top of that. And this is, we just take it for granted. We walk into a room and turn on the switch and we expect the light to come on. It's only if you live in places like India, and Africa, where that doesn't always happen. So, everything seemed to be working fine. And as recently as 10 years back, there wasn't a single utility that was really contemplating that things were going to change very dramatically. It was a centralized plan system, very risk averse, moved very deliberately, highly regulated. What could go wrong? Well, we started seeing a few things starting to happen. We saw climate change issues. We saw hurricanes, we saw fires, we saw, Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, some customers had no power for 240 days. Okay, that's an energy access problem. That's not really a, it's a resiliency issue. And we start to see these, once in 100-year events and, billion-dollar events occurring many, many times a year now. And that tells me that something is fundamentally changing. But this is one major change that was was occurring. The other thing that was changing was really, we were seeing some disruptors starting to show up out there. We were seeing that PV, which was considered an anomaly in the beginning of this century, okay, all of a sudden was starting to ramp up at a pace that was unbelievable, absolutely. Okay, we were seeing PV and storage as dispatchable generation coming in at under the cost of coal and gas. We were seeing storage starting to take off, driven by electric vehicles. Nobody thought electric vehicles were going to be real until Tesla showed that this is not simple boxy cars that are compromises, but are really a force to be contended with. And we are seeing a massive wave of, transportation electrification starting to happen. We started to see things like hydrogen starting to come up. So we see a lot of these things kind of happening, and they're all happening outside the control of the utility sector, who would, I'm sure, wanted to see a much more reasonable progression, under their control, and that's just simply not happening. So why is this disruption actually happening? It's really, in our mind, it's because these technologies are following very steep and sustained learning curves. Okay, for solar, for the last 50 years, we are seeing about a 23% learning curve, which means for every doubling in volume, the prices go down by 23%. And there's almost infinite amount for that to go on. The other thing is, because it's kind of materials light, we're seeing that very thin amount of solar area could provide a large amount of power, and so what we start seeing that that price decline can continue for a very, very long time, and we're seeing that has actually happened. At the same time, battery costs are going down pretty much the same way. And then when you take into account the fact that places like Germany, they introduced a feed-in tariff program, which allowed forward-leaning policies that accelerated deployment of solar and brought it closer to break even. We can start seeing that that's the reason why this has been going on so fast. We also see that every prediction that has been made really over the last 20 years in terms of how this industry would evolve has been spectacularly wrong. So how do you plan? How do you build? How do you invest? How do you do things? So this is the reason, I think, why we're seeing a lot of change. I was part of the National Academy of Engineering Committee on the Future of Electric Power, where we kind of looked at the same issues out here. We saw that change was coming at a pace that we didn't, really know how to predict, and how do you anticipate, and how do you design, and how do you build for, for time like that. We find also that there is an opportunity with all those changes happening. There's an opportunity to redefine what the energy world looks like. When you look at emerging economies that do not have huge investments, we see there's a chance to leapfrog and go to a world of abundant, sustainable energy. This is driven by advances, things like power electronics, automation, digitalization, artificial intelligence, cloud communications, super IoT. All these things were not even there 10 years back in any major form, and yet these are completely shaping the world that we look like, that we are living in. We see that we can now build novel materials that never existed in nature. We are able to manipulate materials at the micro and nano scale, and we are able to do it without using rare materials, so that we can really unleash this unprecedented innovation. We are able to build smart materials and technologies, which again have uniquely designed characteristics, things like catalysts that are able to extract hydrogen from from methane, are able to convert or extract water from salt water, and all these are technologies that have very steep learning curves that can drive the cost down, and that is in some way the way we can get to accelerating the time to impact. There's, I think, in my mind, a once in a human lifetime existence or opportunity that can rapidly transition our energy ecosystem, and take away that question of we need compromises, because this approach allows us to be both planet friendly and wallet friendly. And I think this is really, I think, the major shift that has happened. Is the reason why trillions of dollars are now being invested in these new technologies. The problem is, when these things start moving fast, how do you manage it? How do you control it to move in very unexpected ways? A question I always ask myself is, if Edison were to redesign what the grid, looked like today, would it look the same as it does? And I don't think it would. I think, the fact that all these distributed, decentralized generation technologies are now becoming available, it would kind of evolve towards that. But then when I think about a million of these devices, do I know how to control them? Our entire control paradigm has been based on passive devices that are kind of not changing characteristics all the time. And yet this is kind of where we are going. We're going towards a new paradigm. And when you go to a new disruptive paradigm, what bothers me not so much of what I know I don't know, but what is really bothers me is what do we not know that we don't know, and and then who are the people who are guiding us in the journey? The experts have all been wrong because they are experts in yesterday's technology, and we need to look forward, and we don't have the experts in tomorrow's technology yet, so we don't even understand all the fundamental questions. I think that the analogy is, can you explain quantum physics using the language of Newtonian physics? My suspicion is not. And the new paradigm that we are kind of going towards is this idea of millions of generators and loads that are electrically connected and have to be operating in real time with millisecond, microsecond precision. And you have to balance the system, and you have to ensure stable operation, from the outside, it looks like the utilities are doing this today, and they've been doing it under centralized control. Now, as you decentralize it, can this actually be done? And the NAE report that we had, had a recommendation that suggested that this modular, distributed, and edge intelligent paradigm, would be competitive with the existing grid. But that really creates, a problem, because we don't really know how to even think about it, forget manage it. So I want to stretch your imagination a little bit. So we're talking complex systems out here, right? And complex systems that kind of sustain themselves are like ecosystems. And so I want you to think about the future grid as being kind of like a living ecosystem, and every edge device now, is now intelligent, and yet, I mean, the paradigm today is, I want to centrally control everything. Okay, I'm going to, from the grid operator's perspective, tell every little device what it needs to do. Well, that's going to be problematic because, that presumes communication, and communication technology is changing faster than anything else is changing. And so, you need to now have, the ability to make sure that you can communicate with the devices. You need to know that cybersecurity is not a problem. You need to know the model so that you know what you're going to be actually doing out there. And this becomes problematic. The grid then at that point becomes a little more fragile than you would like it to. What you really want is a system that kind of has simple rules that it can operate. Where the nodes operate in their own self-interest, but also collaborate. So we can start talking about this principle of collaborative control, and where they collaborate to sustain the system as a condition of market participation. We want this thing to be self-aware and flexible, because things change. Things don't always come out the way you want to, and you really want to be able to make sure that you can keep operating even the network changes, or you don't know what the network is and you don't know what the status is. You still want to keep operating. Yesterday, the utilities owned everything in terms of generation. Today, that's not true anymore. With every owner comes its own set of price sensitivities, its own set of desires, its own set of everything that it needs to do. How do you optimize behavior and investments? The utility today is designed with incredible amount of over generation capacity, because if something goes down, they want to keep operating. Okay, tomorrow when everything is running on solar and wind and other things, you're going to have surplus and scarcity. So the grid needs to balance itself dynamically as these conditions change. So do we know of examples like this? Yes, I think the most classic example is the one on the upper left out here. We drive. I mean, I could be driving in a 1921 car next to a 2021 car, and they work fine. And they work fine because we have simple rules in terms of how they have to behave on the road. And then we have the intelligent driver who is able to make decisions and adapt to things that happen in real time. That's very much kind of the balancing function that we are looking for, and there are examples in the electrical world. I mean, there's, Verintech is a company that I had started and is now a part of, it was acquired. But we showed that you could have completely decentralized control on the grid, where these devices were very simple rule-following devices that were able to do collaborative control. We've also been able to show that you can essentially use things like price frequency Drew principles that allow each device in the system to be able to understand what the price is at a certain point and be able to take action and achieve dynamic balance. So we've shown that this is really an integrated approach to doing control of the transaction part of it and the physical part of it. The other good thing is that this kind of a system is really fractal in the sense that, you can break it up and it's going to be able to continue operating. And that is really a very interesting part of what we need to think about out here, because as we now start looking towards, can this extend out to everybody? This becomes a very important piece of it. So when I work with my students, I always ask the question. They all want to, immediately focus on what's the answer. My question always is, what is it that we want to do? Okay. And I tell them that if you had a magic wand, if magic was the only component you had, could you specify what is it that you want done, in a completely technology agnostic manner? Because if you can't do that, then this would become a little bit of a problem. And what we start seeing is that, yes, we can define it because, we're looking at energy. Do I want to build a plant that takes 10 years to build and costs $1 billion or more when the technology is moving in 2-year cycles? And I know that plant is going to be obsolete before it's built, and I know it's not going to be competitive on the day it's being it's commissioned. Is that real or is that not real? It's happening all across the utility space right now. The gas plants that were built with 15-year life cycles are suddenly finding that they're not competitive anymore. Some of them are being mothballed. Some of them. So this is real. This is actually happening. So what do I really want? I want to be able to create this. This building block, which I'm calling a microgen, this is a hypothetical magical device. Remember that, right? And it's essentially a generator, and it takes energy from the sun and gives you whatever you want in terms of being able to generate. And it connects to the grid and can form the grid and can follow the grid and can do whatever you want it to. More important, I want to scale it, right? So I need to have make sure that all the vendors across the world who are building something, can actually, interact with it, because otherwise I can't get to scale very quickly. Okay, so that's one thing. So they need to be able to, collaborate across technology generations, because again, technologies are varying. I want to be expanded to any scale, right? Operate as a microgrid, isolate it, put it together, and everything has to be done automatically, because when I'm in the middle of Africa, I'm not going to have this PhD running the system. So what do I want to do? I tell my students, I put the PhD inside the box. So that's very simple to use and is able to do whatever you want. So this is a truly fractal microgrid, okay, that starts with a single home. Okay, I can connect to another home. I can connect to a third home as I need it. I can, expand the capacity as I need it. Okay, and then I can do other things with it. So at the heart of this, how do I do this? So all these devices essentially have solar panels and batteries, for instance, and they all have to convert that power to AC power. So we need power converters, which are, in this case, are going to be inverters, okay, that, switch very fast, very efficiently, and can dynamically control all the aspects of this, okay, in terms of power, voltage, frequency. And this is something we've been doing for, 40, 50 years now. And it works well. The devices are getting better. And, again, remember the steep learning curve. So these are all following that kind of steep learning curve. We would like these inverters to function with or without the grid, under energy surplus or shortage conditions, without communications with each other, so they don't get kind of hung up. They want to be able to collaborate with each other, form this microgrid, form the ecosystem, share energy as needed, keep track of it, bill each other. All that stuff needs to happen. Again, I think you don't want that PhD to commission and install and operate it. It needs to be very simple across generations, and this is very, very difficult at this point in time. What I really want is I want to be able to interoperate these, with 1 million devices or a single device, with other generators, with compliant devices, non-compliant devices, abnormal conditions, normal conditions. So this becomes a challenge in terms of how we want to do it. And this is the grid as an ecosystem that I was talking about. If you could do this, this would be awesome. So think about the future grid as an ecosystem. Okay, where this magical micro generator can scale from single home systems to small microgrids to large utility systems, can meet the needs of the resiliency and access in other markets. Because think about it, if it's built in this way, okay, and a small part of it breaks down because the storm came, okay, the rest of it keeps operating, okay, right down to the home level. Okay, I think it's really a tragedy that when we had fires in California, we had thousands of homes that had solar panel on the roof, had electric vehicles in the garage, but sat in the darkness, through the whole, number of weeks that they were impacted. That should never happen. That's a failure of imagination, failure of technology, and failure of policy, right? So here again, I think we're looking at a magical micro generator that allows us to, do these wonderful things. So the question is, can it be done? And the answer is we're almost there. I think most of this thing we can do. We are part of a consortium that is being run by DOE through the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, the Unify Consortium, where we're looking at making inverters that are plug and play, that can get past all of these complexities of how to manage themselves. And it's really very challenging, actually, because it's very complex. It's you've got the communications latencies to deal with. You got cybersecurity to deal with. You got variability to deal with. The models are changing all the time. And yet, if you can do that, it's the basis for a flexible, adaptive, and scalable grid. And you do that by using, we're all familiar with how much our televisions have gone down in price. We're all familiar with how much our mobile phones have gone down in price. Okay, and they're all riding this curve down, the same steep learning curves that I keep talking about. Okay, and if we can build these devices so that they are low cost and plug and play, integrate PV, battery, grid interface, and everything else. Okay, you then have a system that is able to do all the things that we want to, do with it. Okay, so this is great. I mean, so we're now kind of launching on this this whole idea of we are able to deploy science that has been developed in the last 30, 40 years, and are now bringing that all back into real applications. And there is no time like the present. We really need all the science that we can get to market, all the science that gets us into decarbonization, that addresses the issues of energy, that addresses the issues of water, that addresses all the things that are really a problem. For the first time, we are at a point where carbon neutral solutions are cheaper and perform better than fossil-based energy solutions. I mean, all the oil companies are now claiming to be greenwashed and saying they're wonderful, and it's great. I think it's wonderful, right? We see massive disruption in virtually all sectors at this point in time, and trillions of dollars are being spent. And because they're all jostling for leadership position, that money is not always going to be spent wisely, but at least directionally, it's where we are going. The developed world is leading this. They have huge investment in existing infrastructure that's going to create winners and losers. But in the case of emerging economies, they may be able to leapfrog and build the new infrastructure, not the old-fashioned way, but in a new way. And I think, if we focus on these things with steep learning curves, I mean, we're seeing examples in electrometallurgy, we're seeing electrochemical refineries, electrodesalination, direct air capture. I mean, these are all areas where science is being, new science is being deployed. And these are all areas that I think present great opportunities for us. All requires money, though. And so at the end of the day, are we also going to see a situation where, again, the developed nations will reap all the benefits, or is this an opportunity for all of humanity? I think this is a fundamental question that we need to answer. And this is the problem of energy access, right? It's a grand challenge. I mean, it's gotten a little better marginally. 700 million people live with no electricity, okay? And 3 billion live with extreme energy poverty. They earn less than $1.90 a day. So there's not a lot of purchasing capacity that you have out there. It's not that we're not doing anything. We've spent billions of dollars over the last 30 plus years, okay? And yet, even as people have gotten light, okay, because LEDs are now cheap and can turn on, only 15 million people, have managed to move to what we call tier 2 access, which is 200 watt hours a day. Okay, so 200 watt hours a day is very, very little power and energy to be able to do anything. And yet, okay, this is where we find ourselves, plus you have refugees, plus you have people who are impacted by climate change because of hurricanes, because of fires, because of, anything else. And so what's the solution for that? the normal answer is philanthropy, but I mean, this is A, is very expensive, and B, is not scalable. And so, I think at the heart of it, people who could be electrified with today's technology have already been electrified because it's an economic business case to be made out there. They've already got it. Everybody else, we are trying to, put a square peg into a round hole, right? So the worry is, of course, that as we transition to this new clean energy system that is so wonderful and does so many wonderful things, will the have-nots be left behind again? Okay, and there is always a danger that this is going to happen, and we're going to see that it's not about just providing energy access, but access that can transform lives, meet people's aspirations, improve their livelihood, health, well-being, and digital and financial inclusion. So this is the very, very tall order. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, well, in 2018, 16 billion a year was spent by World Bank, USAID, NGOs, governments, everybody on improving energy access. That's a fraction of what is needed, but at least something is being spent. But where was it being spent? It was being spent mostly on expanding the centralized grid. Okay, and we've seen that's a bit of a problem, right? But okay, fine, maybe we're doing it. Less than 1% was being spent on distributed solar home systems. Okay, so there's a gap out there. If you think that that's the answer, then this is not where it needs to be going. As we said, tier two, well, you can't even get to tier two. Most of the people can't even get there. And then you take all these sophisticated solutions that we have that have armies of people running around, very expensive, and we translate those down to a population that does not have purchasing power or the expertise to operate and maintain it. What do? The problem is not anything else other than the fact that they are poor. When there's poverty, you just cannot buy enough of the services that are needed to sustain these businesses that are being established. Is this real or is this not real? Let's take a look, okay? So this is the answer for grid extension, which is the first thing. You talk to the World Bank, talk to IFC, talk to everybody, everybody wants to extend the grid. And this has been happening for a lot, right? So here's some data from sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, 95% of the utilities in sub-Saharan Africa cannot recover their operational or capital, costs. It's mainly because customers just, are finding very little demand, from the new electrified customers. Rwanda, for instance, they're consuming 20 kilowatt hours a month when they need to consume 130 kilowatt hours a month for break even. Okay, so, this is not working out. And suppose we got that magic wand again and waved the magic wand and gave them what they wanted, gave them all the electricity and they consumed at OECD levels, what would happen? We'd have 3.7 gigatons more of carbon emissions, which would be a catastrophe. So that's not the answer either. So, what do? Well, the population density is low, so maybe there's some other things that link to population density. Okay, so this is another study that was done. If you look at the center out here, you see that as the size of the community drops, okay, you find that the national grid extension is not necessarily the answer, and you start seeing opportunities for mini grids or microgrids and or solar home systems. Okay, so okay, fine, that's great, right? So the centralized model is the problem. We have these smaller, more nimble approaches. They'll succeed, right? This is lots of work going on in that space. So there's some mini grids out here. Again, what we find is that most of the time the energy is used for charging mobile phones and turning on LED lights. So that does not generate enough income for these people either. And if you look at how the investors are talking about it, yes, for most of the mini grid companies they've invested in, they have very, very difficult time recovering energy from it. They have to look for anchor customers who would cover most of the costs, and the rest of it is kind of almost philanthropic, right? The solar home system. So how do you kind of build a full business based on solar home systems? Again, you say, hey, once they start consuming, you can upsell them on bigger devices, better things, they'll consume more energy, life is going to be good. Well, that's not happening either. Okay, so fundamentally, I think Matt Jordan, my friend, said this very well. Maybe energy access is not an access problem, but a demand problem. And maybe energy poverty is not an energy problem, but a poverty problem. Right, so you have to really address these issues. We can't just turn on put the grid out there and expect that everything's going to magically solve itself, right? So yeah, yes, centralized is high cost of, long implementation cycles. You need skilled labor to install and operate, which is not really available. You need fossil fuels that need to go there, and there's a non-existent load base out there. Similarly, distributed solutions are also too expensive and customized. Okay, and again, I know of cases where we've had to fly engineers into Haiti to fix an inverter on a small solar system. That's a very expensive solar system, when you have to do that. So there needs to be a better way of doing that. Plus, if this is going to kind of work well, you have to have all these enabling technologies interweaved into this, things like pay-as-you-go, communications, data analysis, finance models, business development support. Who's going to pay for that? Remember, they don't have the buying capacity. So this is why we keep struggling with this whole thing. We see that the solutions tend to be customized, are not interoperable, require this expert technical support, very difficult to scale generally. But you have to focus on productive, because ultimately that's how they are going to make make the money. And there's a whole bunch of productive applications that we can think about. So, here's an example: agricultural, industrial, commercial, social, public. There's a tremendous need for it. And then if we take our existing appliances, if I take my kettle, which consumes 1.2 kilowatts, and I, send that into a small community in Africa, and they had to find a solar system to plug that in, it would be inordinately expensive. Right? I mean, and so, we have to now take all those devices that have been designed for the grid and now convert them over into very low energy consuming devices. And there might be compromises involved with, with that. And if these are single kind of purpose appliances that have to run with solar and they're not running 100% of the time, you start seeing, again, problems in terms of utilization, in terms of cost structure, in terms of everything. So we see that PV-based agricultural appliances are seeing 10% growth, which is fine, except that everything else we are seeing is growing 60, 70, 80, 100% a year. Okay, so there's a disconnect out here. Okay, and I'm worried about the fact that, how is this investment going to be coming back? And it also not addressing the need of cooking, of transportation, digital connectivity, and then the need to educate women and create more entrepreneurs. An example of what we have seen, seeing in the grain milling area, for instance. Yes, it's wonderful, and I think we need to see a lot more of that, but it's very difficult to sustain. So we are, we kind of struggled with this. I'm part of the IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It's the world's largest technical organization with 400,000 people, and part of the Power Electronics Society. And we've been kind of looking at this and saying, energy access solutions really need to get in the 21st century. I mean, we always thought about energy access as being, poor, technically low-grade solutions, battery and an LED, and okay, they got light now. But it needs to be the other way around. We need to kind of take that image and put real innovation and some of these exponential technologies into it to make it all work properly. Solutions need to be holistic, because they need to kind of take the customer needs and the business models and everything into account. Okay, not just focused on narrow technical features. And how the hell do you figure out what 1,000 different communities and need? So our thought was that why don't we crowdsource the innovation process, and use that to de-risk not only the technology, but also the business model and actually the scaling process for new solutions. We knew that these new technologies could be modular, could be distributed, and could be integrated together, plug and play in an easy way to create unique value. And there was an opportunity here to break that, that relationship between energy and human development index, because we're seeing that as appliances get more efficient, okay, as technology is better applied, you don't need to consume so much energy to get to that point. And this completely changed the paradigm as we're concerned. So we launched essentially a global competition. It's a recurring competition. We call it Empower a Billion Lives. And the idea was to get teams to develop innovative, scalable, holistic solutions. We just didn't want this to be a technology demonstration, but we wanted it to be something that could scale, which meant that it had to be demonstrated in a real life situation, and it had to address issues of business model and economics and everything else. So the metrics were business, social impact, and technology. We kind of told the teams that they should innovate in just about every field they could think of. whether it's business models or it's device monitoring or it's empowerment or, it's flexibility, it's scalability, or something we just didn't think of as the wow factor. And this was kind of how we launched EBL, a couple of years back. And we were actually surprised. We had almost 450 teams from 70 countries that, that showed up. And we had 5 regional competitions in China, in India, in South Africa, and Europe, and in Americas, and went on to kind of have about 100 teams that came into the regionals, and then 23 global finalists with extensive field testing that showed up. They did everything from microgrids to hybrid grids to pay-as-you-go, stackable solar systems, and some fascinating innovation that we saw, and gave $500,000 in prize money. And with that, I'm going to kind of one more slide before we go to a quick video. The winning team was from IIT Bombay, and this was a very unique kind of marriage between 21st century technology in terms of supply chain and modular design of plug-and-play devices, and then taking those devices into the villages and training women to assemble these devices, market them, sell them, maintain them, and keep the wealth in the communities. So this is very, very unique things that came out of it. This was all made possible by hundreds of IEEE and non-IEEE volunteers from around the world who worked in this. With that, let me kind of open it up for the video. So can you please run the video and tell me when you're done with that? right. So hopefully that gave you a flavor for what the competition was like. Generated a lot of excitement, and I'm pleased to say that we are now, even with the COVID world, we're in the midst of our second EBL competition. We've because of COVID, we've shifted the schedule a little bit, and we are in the process of accepting concept papers now until the beginning of April. And then March is when the global final is, with field tests in between. We've expanded this time the tracks, which initially were just decentralized, centralized model. We've also recognized the need for automation. We've recognized a much more aggressive stance on productive use devices and the role that enabling technologies play. And then we want to open this up for student teams to be able to participate. And again, I think we're seeing good response. Here's a shout out. Please, tell your universities and others to kind of participate. It's a great way for technologies to kind of get out. I want to say that, a lot of the teams teams are really kind of functioning companies. We kind of displays a role of what VCs look for in terms of de-risking the technology from both a technology as well as a real use case validation and a business model validation perspective. So these are really important things in our mind. I've kind of focused on the technology issues because this is more of a science and technology discussion. But I want to kind of point to the fact that the non-technical issues are probably more challenging, or at least as challenging. I do believe that the new technologies that we have been discussing show a way of getting in much faster than the old technologies can. But at the same time, I mean, let's not forget the fact that for this to work, you have to have the governments involved. Okay, you have to have the World Bank involved. You have to have a significant amount of resources all be put together. And today, what is happening? We've seen this is that everybody has their own kind of perspective. They're all in their own organizational silos, and they all have their own priorities, their own KPIs. And they're not leveraging each other's work, very well. And if you could kind of get that cooperation going, the governments would know where to focus, the funders would know which solutions to support, technology developers would know which solution, attributes to develop, and the solution providers would know where deployments are needed. And that would then go into kind of supporting this national integrated energy plan framework that we've been, kind of looking at, where you want to have a good top-down view of what needs to be done, but you also need to have a flexible bottom-up implementation, because we have very fast technology cycles, and the top-down views tend to be very rigid and very difficult. And we've seen examples now where, with the right type of approach, and I think India has shown that a couple of times, where you take the right approach from the top down, and it really accelerates technology development. We saw that with the government, the German program as well. So this is what I think really needs to be done. In terms of if you look at how NGOs and the governments operate today, because the decisions tend to be made based on what's available in terms of technology. Okay, but these technologies are moving fast. And if you can take a forward-looking view, okay, it helps to guide the market or develop the solutions that meets the social and financial objectives. So it's a slightly different way of thinking about, about this. And then finally, of course, we need to focus on improving the livelihoods and not just providing access. Okay, so energy access, not a silver bullet. Have to look at it in broader cross-sectoral lens. You have to look at food security. It's people, right? I mean, you have to understand what their issues are, and you have to kind of, not just throw solutions at them, but make them a part of the solution. And I think this is really important in my mind. So with that, I want to kind of begin to wrap up. I know we are kind of running out of time, but I think energy is really at the cusp of fundamental transformation. I mean, we've seen that the National Academy report said exactly the same thing. We're moving from a centralized fossil-based system to a distributed, decentralized system, and everybody's struggling with what that transition looks like. Okay, we don't understand the questions fully. We don't understand what could go wrong, and we're going to see a lot of things go wrong before they eventually go right. And I think we need to be kind of ready for that. It's my belief, and I think a lot of people are voting with their pockets on that, is that these technologies with steep learning rates, are going to dominate at some point in time, because the costs are becoming so low and the performance is so high, and all things are right from a climate perspective. And if you couple that with incentives, okay, that come in at the right time when they're approaching economic break-even, you can really dramatically accelerate. We've seen that in solar, we've seen that in batteries, and we can see that in other areas as well. As long as we keep the focus on societal goals of growth, sustainability, and equity, and we do not make the goals narrow technology goals, I think that's the right way to think about it. I don't think large centralized systems are the answer anymore. I think decentralized, modular, flexible, interoperable solutions, okay, that work across vendors, across time generations, right, I think is the right answer, because it avoids tech obsolescence, okay? And with fast-moving technology cycles, you're going to actually see that. We see energy access is very, very challenging. The main problem is poverty. Okay, and one way to address that I showed, and may not be the only way to approach, I just want to show one example, is that you have small modules that can be viable economically and technically viable at very small values, and kind of scale that up, and you can have the same solution go all the way across. Then you get the mass manufacturing benefits to really kind of begin to apply. We know that decentralized systems are very hard to control. But if we can get it right, I think it's the right way to do it, because it gives you resiliency, it gives you reliability, and it gives you cost effectiveness. And it's a leapfrog opportunities for those who have greenfield situations where they had to build from the ground up, where they have nothing in the field right now. This is the right way to kind of do it. And then involve everybody in the innovation process. And that's why we believe that crowdsourcing of innovation is really very important, and it helps to de-risk technologies, which shrinks time to market. De-risk the business side of it, shrinks time to market. I think we need hundreds of more EBLs across all kinds of fields, not just out here. Okay, so I think we have a challenge for everybody out here. I think we have to implement something that's more sustainable and economical and equitable. And we have to do it in the next 10 or 20 years. So accelerating science to impact is key in my mind. I'm hoping that we've got people a little excited about what we've been talking about. I'm hoping that, everybody can kind of go in and see how we can make a difference. I mean, this is our world to save, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak, Divan, for that incredibly informative, exciting, and optimistic talk. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Sally Morton. I'm the Executive Vice President of Knowledge Enterprise at Arizona State University. ASU is honored to be the sponsor of this session, and I'm honored to get to talk more with Dr. Divan for a few minutes. And I invite our audience, who've already been submitting questions, keep doing that, and I'll try to ask as many questions as I can. So Deepak, I want to start with a question that was sent in from the audience, and I should tell you that in the chat, which we couldn't see, there were just incredibly positive comments on your talk. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
And let me start. Yep, thank you very much. Let me start with the first question for you. How do you envision the integration of large-scale renewables like wind farms or hydropower into a new fractal reimagining of energy production and distribution?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think we probably need it all. I think the best example I can see is if you look at Germany and Denmark. They have been running pretty heavy on wind and some solar, but there have been times the day when they're running at 130% of capacity because they have so much of wind generation going on, and then other times they have a big shortage. Right, and so one very nice example is they built a high voltage DC link to Norway, and Norway has a lot of hydropower resources available, and they use the hydro to balance. And so when there's an excess of power, they export that and throttle back on hydro, and vice versa. They're not even building pumped hydro to manage that. So there's an example of how I think all the resources can be used. The National Academy report I talked about, we discussed something really interesting. I mean, the traditional utility view is, we focus on the bulk power system for reliability because that's where all the power originally, comes from, right? And yet there is not a single customer who is sitting on the bulk power system. All the customers are sitting at the edge of the grid and distribution, and nobody is really actively measuring that reliability as much. Yet what we see is that, maybe reliability and resiliency comes from the edge of the grid, okay? Because that's where resiliency is needed. That's, when you have that storm and things go down, that's where you need it. Now, as electric vehicles come in and you have, very high peak charging requirements, where's that going to come from? So we are starting to see a lot of distributed generation being put in at the edge of the grid as well. And you need to coordinate all these resources. Right. So, I mean, the bulk power system will probably never be fractal. And why should it? I mean, we have a very good functioning bulk power system, it should do it. 99% of the time, it can be exporting power just the way it normally does, except that 1% of the time, we now have a backup system and it is able to, manage the peaks a little better, all of that. So it's the reimagining of what needs to be done. We work a lot with, some of the system operators, and everybody's struggling with this. It's not that, the answers are there. And I think, we need to kind of not wait for the sky to come crashing down before we start finding a problem. We need to look at it now.
Thank you for that. And I encourage the audience to look at that National Academy's report. I took a look before this session. It's very informative. So thank you for mentioning that again. I really love the question that you posed to your students about using a magic wand to create our new system, because I think it really prompts us to think about how we value our access to energy. And I know that different people would have different answers to that question. And you said it in your talk, I think this way: how do you figure out what 1,000 different communities need and want? So is your center helping to empower people, communities, to make these decisions for themselves? Or is there other work you could point our audience to?
No, I mean, I think our center has been more focused on what needs to be done from a technology perspective. But here's the difference, right? I mean, almost all my peers in engineering, faculty, we start looking for answers almost immediately, because, and I keep telling my students that, they say, tell me what you want me to do and I'll go find the answer. I said, and what happens if you work for 3 years and find it was the wrong question? Are you ahead or behind? So I think, the more important thing in my mind is to spend time to try to find the right question. And we do a process of what we call storyboarding, where we actually look at the problem very, very broadly, and drive my students to distraction sometimes, because we're doing things that they just don't see the need for, but it informs it. And what it does is, I think it aligns, the idea of accelerating to impact is always front and center for us. And if we understand all the interactions and we understand all things that could hold it down, or could make it easier to deploy, if those things are addressed on day one, then they inform the solution, and the solution is automatically aligned with faster adoption. So we've seen that, and that's the reason why we've had more luck, I think, with getting these technologies to market.
Thank you. I think this next question, which came from our audience, really relates to some of the comments you just made. And the question is, you mentioned that the big worry is that we don't know what we don't know. What are your thoughts on how to deal with the non-technological what we don't knows while creating this bottom-up grid paradigm shift? And I guess for me, it's also, how do you integrate both those things together?
Well, that's the thing that worries me the most, right? What do I know? What do I not know is going to happen at all, right? I mean, and the only way I know of dealing with that is to have systems that are flexible and adaptive. It's one of the reasons that we've come back to this idea that things need to be distributed and modular, okay? Because if something is wrong, then the part where it goes wrong is well contained. To give, and this is why I love the analogy of the cars. I mean, we drive, and some days it takes me 30 minutes to get to work. Some days it takes me 45 minutes to get to work. Okay, so you don't always get what you want in life. So why should it happen in energy? I mean, this is life we're living, right? So some days when the sun is shining and everything is good, I have surplus, everything is good. But other days when I have a storm and, maybe I don't have everything, right? I mean, so this is really, I think, more a reflection of these, properties back onto every system and every other system, whether, if you're taking Uber, some days you have surge pricing, you just have to wait. Okay, but not in energy, because of somebody, we socialize the cost of energy. So, I can stomp my feet and want instant service because I'm not paying the price for it. Because I think therein lies part of the challenge, my opinion.
Thank you for that. I have two related audience questions for you. I'll ask them together because they're related, and I really want to thank the audience. They're sending in great questions. The first question is, are we developing new technologies fast enough before the climate impact we are already seeing? And in your talk, you talked about the changes that we've seen in just the last 10 years. And a related question also from the audience, distributed power is vital with climate change, increasing extreme weather events. Will electrical utilities still exist in 25 years? And how much will their pushback slow progress?
Very, very difficult questions and very important questions, right? I mean, I have great friends in the utility sector, so I wish they are all here for a very long time, providing the energy that we need, right? And yet I worry about it because, you know, the utility industry, you know, if I look at what they were like 100 years back, they were dynamic, they were very, very innovative, and with that comes chaos, right? And that didn't allow the market to grow very well. So it ended up becoming more regulated, so everybody could kind of connect together and interoperate. But with that, you lose the edge in terms of innovation. Okay, and things got and they're fine because but now you take things that are moving at rocket speed and integrate that in. Okay, and everything is connected back with the grid. Okay, and everything is moving at rocket speed except the grid. Okay, and this becomes challenging, I think, and this is something that we need to figure out how to resolve. I think they're all responding. I think they're trying to put a lot of storage. There's a lot of nuances. I mean, we have generations of utility engineers who've been trained in the traditional way of doing power systems engineering, and they haven't had the luxury of seeing devices that move in microseconds and are able to change their behavior completely, radically, and these things can be very difficult and different. We don't even know how to control them and how they will interact with each other. So I think we have the opportunity to have tremendous chaos. Okay, but I think we also have the opportunity, if you think this is why we want this thinking to happen before we do, right? And my personal belief is I think we're very close to having devices that will be behaving. And I'll give you an example, right? I mean, today every generator is told what they need to do. Okay, it's dispatch. Okay, and then something else takes care of dynamic interactions that are happening. My favorite example for this is, if you and your spouse are riding on a tandem bicycle, how do you share power? I mean, nobody's telling each other what they want to do and what speed they want to go. So there's some rules that are there, and then you're using the feedback just from the way your feet are operating that allows you to take more power when you're going uphill or whatever, right? And this is how you really want that sharing to to occur. So I think by embedding that intelligence, by embedding this property of figuring out what is actually happening on the system and reflecting that back into your controls, by looking at, I don't want to interact with all the other inverters and cause instability. I don't want to, interact with generators and cause instability. And today, when I put those PhDs inside the box, I have a chance of being able to do that.
Thank you for that. Another question from the audience. You talked toward the end of your talk about involving everyone in the process. How can we ensure that the people who need and will use these systems will define what they would like to see?
Now, that's another great question. I mean, but there's another caveat to that, right? I mean, I think Henry Ford said it very well. He said, if I'd asked my customer what he needed, he'd have said a faster horse cart. Right, and therein lies part of the challenge, and this is, even what we do in our center, we work a lot with the industry, but most of the time we're not really. If we ask them, what they want us to do, I know the answer to that. It's an increment to what their business model is and what their investment is, and that's perfectly fine. But there's no industry in the world that's going to come and tell you, give me technology that'll disrupt my own industry. Right. So, and yet that's where, new innovation is often taking us. So, I think one of the reasons we wanted to, in case of EBL in particular, wanted to have that deep information coming from the communities was because, we wanted them to focus not on, necessarily on what the communities were asking for, but, giving them aspirationally what they could do to get their life to be better, to do the things that we, in terms of productivity and their livelihood, that's kind of the way we think about the problem.
Yeah, I really enjoyed learning about Empower a Billion Lives. I'm sure others in the audience did as well. This is a pretty challenging question, and I expect no less from the AAAS audience. From the audience, is there a place for small-scale nuclear power in this decentralized system design?
Absolutely. I mean, small is relative, right? I mean, is it 100 megawatts? Is it 300 megawatts? Is it a gigawatt, or is it 10 megawatts? I mean, we've been, again, the National Academy report is very good, kind of case in point out here. We looked very deeply at, small modular reactors, 300 megawatt type of scale. And, when you get to a big city, I mean, 300 megawatts is small. Okay. So, I mean, there's levels of small and big, but I mean, we're also looking at, portable nuclear reactors. My biggest worry with that is not so much the nuclear reactors that, I think, you worry about safety and, and radiation leaks and everything else, but really the long-term disposal of radioactive waste. I mean, that's something we continue to worry about and continue to grapple with. And in the ideal world, I would not have to worry about that. I mean, if I look at some of the new technologies, I mean, they don't have that issue. Carbon sequestration is another example, right? I mean, to bury carbon in the ground, is not necessarily the answer, but we're seeing some really novel technologies coming out now that takes, direct air capture as one example, where you take it and, turn that into solids. Okay. Now you're fine. I mean, you can sequester that for forever. We're seeing examples now where you take methane, for instance, or other hydrocarbons, crack that and get hydrogen. You precipitate carbon out in some useful form like graphene or something else and burn the hydrogen. Great. I mean, this is where science comes in. Okay, this is something we couldn't do properly 10 years back at any kind of reasonable cost. And now all those cost trajectories look very positive. Huge amounts are being invested in it. So I'm very optimistic.
Thanks for that. I think this may be our final question. You talked about how we're moving to a system that's both planet friendly and wallet friendly. And you said in your talk that we're close. And I guess it's really a big question. How far away are we from a planet friendly and wallet friendly power solution for the majority of the world, do you think?
I think we are there, actually. I mean, if you look at, I'm seeing humongous, PV storage hybrid farms starting to go in now. Okay, I think, wind, of course, is going in, but, and today wind is still economical, but, in my mind, I mean, you can't, there's a limit beyond which you can't really scale wind without this become very massive. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope to be wrong on that, but, PV scales really, really well. We're seeing that that's already the case now. Okay. Electrification has started to, take off. So I'm very optimistic at this point in time. The biggest problem in my mind is you have trillions of dollars of investment in the ground right now. Okay, and what do you do with that? Okay, it's gonna play out economically the way it's gonna play out, because some companies will adapt and some companies won't, and they'll mothball their. It's what happened when automobile scale came to the U.S. and railroads died or shrunk. I mean, so this is a part of the process of disruption. It shouldn't be try to work.
Well, Dr. Deepak, Divan, I hate to wrap up this conversation, but we're coming up on our time. I'd like to thank you again so much for this truly inspiring talk, for this conversation, and for sharing not only your really deep scientific knowledge, but your passion for the social and cultural implications of this work. You've given us a lot to think about. I also want to thank the audience for their excellent questions and for joining us today. And now I'll turn it over to the AAAS President, Susan Amara, for some quick concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank you both, Deepak and Sally, for a really exciting, thoughtful, and important discussion that I'm so glad we had here. I hope you enjoyed, to the audience, I hope you enjoyed another day of thought-provoking scientific sessions, workshops, and other great content. Tomorrow, I hope you'll join us for topical lectures on black holes, on public engagement, energy justice, and a closing plenary that should be fun, featuring a dynamic discussion of the future of science communication, moderated by our own Holden Thorpe, who's the editor-in-chief of Science. and much more. Lots of good science tomorrow too. See you then. Thanks for joining us, and thank you both.